Hey guys, welcome to IQ Chess. Hope you're having a fantastic day and thank you so much for joining me in today's video. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you an easy to play repertoire against the London system. So, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. D4, D5 and bishop to F4. A quick note, there are two main ways to play the London system. By far the most common one is with this move of bishop to F4 on move 2. However, the more accurate way is with knight to F3 on move 2 and then putting the bishop on the F4 square because it gives far more flexibility to white. In today's video, I will only be covering bishop to F4 on move 2. We will take a look at knight to F3 on move 2 in a later video. So, with that being said, here we will play the move of C5, immediately confronting white on what they're going to do. This is called as the Steinitz counter gambit and it's by far one of the most aggressive ways to play against the London system. Here, white has 5 main moves: E3, C3, knight to F3, knight to C3 and D takes on C5. We will go one by one. Let's begin with the move of E3. Here, we just simply capture this pawn. Obviously, queen takes does not make sense. It just gives us free tempo, so black will capture with their e-pawn. And this is actually an exchange Caro-Kann pawn structure. What I mean by that is the Caro-Kann defense, if you know, is one where white begins with e4. We play the move of c6. We have d4, d5, and white exchanges the pawns. So we don't have a c-pawn, white doesn't have an e-pawn. And typically in these structures, white would want to have a bishop on the d3 square with a pawn on c3. That's how white usually plays. However, in this example, if you see with d4, d5, bishop to f4, and this whole e3 system, there's a bishop on f4 for some reason. And we will simply put our bishop here before white does it. So the way we'll play it is knight to c6, putting pressure on this pawn. Obviously, playing bishop here would just lose this pawn, so they can't do it. So something like knight to f3 or c6 is the main option. And here we will go bishop to f5, capturing this diagonal. The best way for white to continue playing is with this move of c4, putting pressure immediately. Anything else, if white just plays c6, for example, and is passive, we don't really bother. Against c4, the most theoretical and most aggressive approach. We go for knight to f6. We don't really care because if they capture, I mean, they give a knight on the center, which is strong for us, and they have isolated pawn. So white usually doesn't take. They'll play something like knight to c3, adding one more attacker. We can play e6 and slowly build up. We can put the bishop here or on d6 to trade. This bishop can even go to b4 in some variations. And in general, the Caro-Kann structures, exchange Caro-Kann in specific, our main game plan is to actually expand on the queen side and go for a minority attack. And if at any point this bishop develops, let's say for example in this move, if bishop develops, we can simply take it and white will lose a tempo, basically. Not exactly the square, I'm just giving a vague example. So another choice for us would be, instead of playing this move of bishop to f5, to play in a typical Caro-Kann style with the move of g6. And here the main idea is to just simply feint to the bishop here. So for example, like, I mean, white can just play bishop to d3, capturing this diagonal. And we just play the move of bishop to g7, c3, and knight to f6. We are actually in a Rubinstein variation of the Caro-Kann exchange. Knight bd2, and we just castle. We can go and trade this bishop if we want to and put the pawns on light squares to combat the white's bishop and go on. So that was this variation. Let's go all the way back to this position. Quick interruption. If you are enjoying the video so far and find my content to be informative, please scroll down below and subscribe to my channel. Like this video to boost the algorithm and check out my homepage and description for more opening videos just like this. Let's get back to the video. To this position, and instead of the move of e3, white plays the move of c3, and this is really interesting. Now here you can still go for the stakes. That's perfectly valid. However, I prefer the move of queen to b6. Super tricky stuff. Why? Well, we are simply punishing white for moving up the bishop so early, and this pawn is pretty hard to defend. White has so many choices. White can play b3, queen b3, queen c1, queen c2, and so on. So let's go one by one again. If the pawn goes to b3, we just take this pawn, and if white takes with the c pawn, for example, here we just go bishop to f5. We have this strong clamp in the center, and we don't really care. We are fine with this position. We just develop naturally with knight to c6, put the pawn on e6, and just keep playing. But the more accurate way of playing is with queen takes on d4, and here after a queen trade, we have this position. And here once again we go for bishop to f5, capturing this key diagonal. Knight to c3, putting pressure on our pawn, and e6, defending our pawn. Here the move of knight to b5 looks very scary because, well, how are you going to stop this? And the answer is we can't stop it. But you need to remember this key move of bishop to b4 check. And after the king moves, we play the move of knight to f6. You're like, why? What's the point? Well, we are inviting white into our territory. Like, welcome, come on, fork me. We'll play king to d7 and white captures our rook. But the move of knight to e4 is completely crushing, and we are having an advantage already. Because this pawn is not defendable. If white puts a knight on h3, we just take it. So the only option white has is to play bishop to g3, at which point we just take the bishop. And after h takes, this knight is just trapped. This knight is just literally trapped in the corner of the board. You can also, instead of taking, go like this with knight to c3 check. That's also a valid option. But either way, this knight is not getting out anytime soon. And after we move our knight, we can just capture this knight for free. And we got two pieces for our rook, which is better. And both of us can castle, and our king is more active. So that's the reason why this is better for us. Going all the way back, another choice instead of knight to f6, if you think that's lunatic, you can play the move of knight to a6, simply defending the square. And after rook to c1, which is the most common move, here you can just play knight to f6. There is no threat. If white puts the knight here, we can just capture it. They're gonna castle soon, so yeah, it's good for us. Going all the way back, that was the move of b3. But white can also play this really cunning move of queen to b3, which is the best move, by the way. Here we just trade the queens, and after a takes on b3, c takes on d4, c takes on d4, bishop to f5, knight to c3. Once again, we have e6 and the same idea. If white comes here, remember this check of bishop to b4 and king to d1. And in this particular variation, there is no knight to f6 because they simply fork us. We don't have a choice because this pawn is undefended, and after they take our rook, they'll take the pawn and they'll escape. So we indeed have to play the move of knight to a6 to prevent the fork. And white might choose to sacrifice. That's highly ambitious and get our, our rook. However, it's not really a good thing. White should focus rather on the development with moves like e3 and keep going. So yeah, that was the idea after the queen trade. Going all the way back, another choice for white is this move of queen to c1, defending this pawn. And here we will just capture this diagonal with bishop to f5. D takes on c5 is the most common move, and we take with the queen. Our queen is in the center of the board, but it is perfectly placed. There is no threat. If white just develops naturally with moves like e3, for example, we can also continue developing with the moves like knight to d7, playing for e5. A move like b4 doesn't really make sense here because, well, then our queen just drops back, and this is a serious overextension by white, and they're gonna be in trouble soon. So yeah, let's go back. Another move here, I'm sorry, there's a lot, is queen to c2. Now white defends the pawn and also contests for this diagonal. Here we play c takes on d4, and after c takes on d4, do not move the bishop away. Sorry, take this pawn. I'm extremely sorry. Do not take this pawn because that's a mate over here. So we have to play the move of knight to c6, just covering this mate, and now our rook defends our bishop. And after knight to f3, for example, we have g6. I'm sorry. Once again, we're gonna feinch it as a bishop in this diagonal and continue on playing. Something like e3, bishop to f5, attacking the queen. The queen has to move. We trade. After a takes, we play bishop takes on b1 and rook takes on b1, and this is one of the most ugliest things ever in chess. This is just pathetic, like what is happening here. And we need to just monitor this critical b5 square with the move of a6. And after we put a bishop on g7, play the move of e6, we have 7 pawns on light squares, so this bishop is kind of unhappy. And in the end game, this horrendous pawn structure will be a massive liability for white, and it's very hard to defend and play on. So you'll have a really good time playing this position. Okay, let's get back to all the way to this position. That was the whole line with the move of c3. The next we'll be taking a look at the move of knight to f3. And here our idea is to simply take this pawn. As I discussed earlier, queen takes is brain dead. So the main moves that white can play are with knight takes or c3. Knight takes is not an optimal way to play because of the move of f6, simply trying to fork them. The knight has to retreat now either to f3 or b3. Let's say f3 for example. We just play e5, bishop moves, and we have this massive center. We can go queen b6, we can play knight to c6, we can play bishop to e6 for example, and then go bishop to b4 and just attack immediately. So that's how we play this position. If white plays c3 for example, you just ignore the pawn and just play queen to b6. It's the same thing. If they take back, this is a threat, and we can just develop naturally. Bishop to f4, bishop to f5, I'm sorry, e6, knight to f6, knight to c6, and keep playing. So let's come all the way back to this position, and let's take a look at the move of d takes on c5, which is a move that not good players will play. I mean, they could play, but this is generally seen in lower levels. And here the main idea is going to be to ignore them, just play knight to f6, and something like knight to f3 for example. We'll play knight to c6, and let's say e3, e6. How is white defending this pawn? The answer is they can't. The best way to play is with this move of c4, once again immediately clashing in the center. We will just recapture this pawn. We are not too worried about this capture right away because we just take with the knight. After knight to c3, putting more pressure, we just castle immediately because, well, now white will take c takes on d5. We can play knight takes on d5 or e takes on d5, it's up to you. Let's say knight takes on d5 for example. Knight takes and we play d takes, and in this position we end up with the isolated queen's pawn. So this could be good for both players. If you know how to play with isolated pawn, you can have a good time. You can just develop around this pawn, bishop out, put the rook on e and c files, play with the open files. The queen can come out like this. Our king is pretty safe. They are ready to castle, so we can immediately go and start troubling them. So yeah, this is a really wonderful position to play, in my opinion. And finally, we need to discuss the most crucial move that white has, which is this move of knight to c3, which is actually the best move, kind of in a Jobava London style. And here the simple way for me that I like to play, the main moves are actually knight to f6. However, the way I play is simply play a6, and that's a middle finger to their Jobava plan. Now they are not going to put a knight here and ever. So after they capture, go e6. They can't defend this pawn. If they go b4, just b6. These pawns are going to fall pretty soon. They can't be held together. So yeah, good luck playing. I mean, and if they don't play, if they just play something like e6, we just recapture, we develop naturally, and we have a good game. Another idea would be in this position, they can play the move of knight to f3, and here we will recapture. e4 is the best way to play, just immediately contesting in the center of the board. Knight to e7, defending this pawn instead of knight to f6 because they can kick us out. They recapture, we can capture them. Bishop d3, knight bc6, castles and castles, and we reach a fairly normal position. Once again, we have isolated queen's pawn, and we can just develop around it with bishop on e6 or bishop on g4, get the rook to the open files, bring the queen out this way, and start attacking. So yeah, the main problem of the London is that it's very solid. Like, it's very hard to, I mean, white always will have equality. White can simply develop without much risk and reach a good position. The main motive of this video is to give you systems where you take white out of their comfort zone. None of these variations I showed you, white gets to achieve their typical London stuff with pawns on e3 and c3, knight here, bishop here, and knight here. That's the typical way the London system players play. So that would be for this video, guys. If you enjoyed watching this video, I do recommend subscribing and turning on the notification bell. It really keeps me motivated. If you have any questions, you can drop a comment below. I will get back to it as soon as possible. So yeah, with that being said, take care. Bye.